I'm not ready. Hi, this is Sherry Grunska with the Horse Barn Management Show, and we were talking about chicken pot pie. So we're a little late getting here. Anyways, hi everybody, welcome to the show. And this is the Horse Barn Management Show put on by Pro Barn Management and myself. And it's Open Topic Monday. Woohoo! So, first of all, I'm super excited. Last Monday, we went international. We had someone from Australia watching us, which was so cool because even though it was 6:30 Central Time here, it was like 10:30 in Australia time the next day, and she was watching us. So that is so cool. So thank you, yay! And we've also had people from Ontario, Canada, watching us. And so thank you so much. I guess we've gone international, so that's kind of cool. And I want to thank you for joining me tonight. Before we get started, we have a lot of things to talk about, and I hope you guys send in your questions. You can text me at 205-7518-920 area code, or write on Facebook, type it in. My friend Trisha is going to put your hand out there. Trisha is gonna read the questions to me because I am looking at the camera. And so if you have questions, I will try to answer them the best I can. The first thing I want to tell you guys, I'm so excited to announce I'm only doing one this summer, for the whole year actually. We're having a 2-day barn management workshop here at our barn, June 12th and 13th. So check it out. You can go on Facebook, you can go on probarnmanagement.com to find out all the information. I guarantee you we are going to talk about everything. If you want to board horses, no matter how many you have, you want to make money, you don't want to lose money, you want to make the job easy, you want to be able to get a system that works best for you, and we will tell you everything we did. We built our barn from nothing but farmland. We'll tell you about the mistakes, the financial problems we had with that, even our lawsuits. We had some lawsuits in the whole thing. It was kind of crazy. But the thing is, going on 16 years now later, our barn is healthy. We are a full barn. It runs very smooth. And that's where I want you to be. I want you to be able to have a business that is sound financially, and also for your mental well-being. It's you have it in a way that you can run it and have your sanity. That's what I want for you. So we have people signing up for it already. We're only taking 20 people for this workshop. So if you're interested, please email me, call me. I'll tell you more about it. It's definitely worth your time. Every time I've done this, we've even had people come from out of state. Come out for the weekend, fly in for the long weekend, or drive. I guarantee you it'll be fun. You'll be meeting all kinds of barn owners, barn managers, people who want to start a horse boarding business, and it's great conversation. We talk about everything, the nitty gritty. So, okay, that's enough on that.
We already have 2 questions.
Oh my gosh, yahoo! Good, I have lots of questions here, but if you've got some, there's a couple here that I'm going to for sure answer tonight.
Okay.
But go ahead and let's get started. We're going to jump right in.
Do you use an electronic barn management system? If so, which? If not, do you know of any that you would recommend for first-time barn owners?
Electronic barn management? You mean like keeping track of records and stuff? See if they answer back on that. So I had someone else ask me a similar question like that, like what do you do to keep track of the financials? Or scheduling. So tell me if that's what you think, if you're asking. So a barn management system, what I do here is, it's actually, I'm kind of old school, but it's very simple. But I'll tell you what I've used for years is QuickBooks. QuickBooks is fantastic. Now you can have it hooked up through the internet. It's hooked up through your bank account. It itemizes everything. If you have an accountant, which unless you're an accountant, I hope you do have an accountant, he can look at it. It just makes your taxes easier. It makes your quarterly reports easier. It depends on how complicated your whole business is. For instance, if you're doing horse shows, if you're also have trainers and as employees instead of independent, a lot of other things go into it. I have employees, but I am a big fan of QuickBooks. But there are a lot of equine programs out there for scheduling, for lessons, for using the arena, different times to use the arena, but I have not used any of those.
That was what she was talking about.
Scheduling?
Schedule, cost, expenses, feed and orders, and such.
Okay. I use QuickBooks. I have all these years. It works great. It's super easy. And that's great for your expenses, your cost, and I love it. And it's worked very good. I have a really easy way of doing it. And so I like that. But as far as scheduling, like I said, if you're going to do a scheduling of programs, of lessons, arena use, and stuff like that, there are some equine programs out there for barn managers. I just have not used any of those.
And she also asked, do you offer a QuickBooks template for sale?
I don't, but QuickBooks, if you go on QuickBooks, you can go on there and they'll set you up. And then I don't know if you have an accountant, but they can all, like I have an accountant that does a lot of my stuff, so he answers a lot of my questions if I'm not sure where something goes, because I'm not an accountant and I need someone that knows what they're doing so I don't get myself messed up with anything, taxes or any of that. So I actually pay an accountant to help me with some of that stuff. So I hope that answers your questions on
And I
that.
had one that's totally different.
Go ahead. Open topic Monday. It's okay. We're open for anything.
How do you manage buildup of waste hay in paddocks? Do you clean them out, and how often?
Okay. I know you're going to think this sounds crazy, but we really don't have a waste. And when I say that, it's going to sound, I know that's not a good answer, but we don't have a waste. I don't know how much hay you're feeding, and are you feeding round bales out there, free choice? We feed so much hay in the morning, and the horses go out into paddocks, and by the middle of the day, it's pretty much eaten up. Once in a while, depending on the hay, and sometimes they get a little picky, they'll pick through it or they'll leave some. But we honestly, our horses eat it all up, and we just don't have too much of a problem. Now we do scrape our paddocks once we can get in there in the spring. So right now we're really muddy. We cannot scrape the paddocks. We can't get a skid loader in there because the skid loader will just sink right down. So we have to let everything kind of sit. So some of the hay might get ground into the mud and it just sits there, and we'll scrape it. But I guess my question would be, how much hay are you feeding? Is, what's going on there? Because we honestly, they eat every piece usually. So we haven't had a problem with that. Even in our stalls, okay, this is something I kind of have talked to a lot of barn managers about, and that's why I like people to come to our barn so I can show them, give them a real good visual on how we do things. But they'll say they put their hay in hay nets because they don't like all the wasted hay in their stall. And we feed on the ground in our stall. We have screenings and then rubber mats. And then we just put the hay, bedding, then we have shavings. And we just put the hay right on the ground. And we have a couple horses that are a little bit lighter eaters. We have, the thoroughbreds. I have a thoroughbred, and then we have a thoroughbred in our big barn. And, thoroughbreds are kind of light eaters, so we kind of watch that. But for the most part, the horses gobble down everything. So I fed tonight, and they'll eat good part of the evening through the middle of the night, and by the morning it's gone. So we don't have too much wasted hay unless for some reason the hay, once in a while they get a little picky. If the horses are in their stalls for a long period of time due to the weather, sometimes they tend to eat a little less. They get bored and they get full and they don't eat as much. And I sometimes tend to feed a little bit more because they're in their stalls and I don't want them kicking or, I want to keep them busy. and sometimes we have a little bit more wasted hay, but usually they eat it all up pretty good.
Yes. She responded and said, feeding flakes of hay right now, but trying to find a balance of free choice and not too much waste.
Okay, so free choice. Tell me, a lot of people will do free choice, and that means they want the hay out there all the time for the horses constantly to have something. And we don't do that. And if you don't agree with me, it's perfectly okay. But the horses are okay if they go a couple hours without hay. In the winter when it's really cold, David will feed really heavy, and then they're going to have hay most of the day. In the spring and summer, we feed a lot less, and they'll go a few hours, without hay, and then we get them in the barn. I was going to say in the house. Get them in the house, get them in the barn, and we feed them again. And so when you are doing free choice where they have hay all the time, people, this is my own personal thought, and there's a lot of people out there that are, maybe agree with me, maybe not. I've read lots of different articles on it. But the problem is, I think a lot of places, and a lot of people tend to overfeed their horse, just kind of like they overfeed their dogs. They want to keep them happy all the time. And, a lot of horses aren't really being used as much as we think they're being used. They're not getting the exercise they're supposed to be getting. They end up being overweight, a lot of them. There's a lot of obese horses, I think, in the United States. And, when they're content, they just don't eat. They're full, and they don't have to rush to eat because they know the hay is going to be there. So we just feed a little less and monitor it. When the horses are out in their paddocks, it's really hard to monitor how much each horse is getting. I love when I see the horses playing and they're not hungry, and they'll leave the hay and they'll get back to it because they know they can get to it. But then when the horses come in the evening and they're in their stalls, then we can feed accordingly to each horse and what the horse needs. So you can really kind of define it then. But when they're out in herds, it's a little bit harder to control that. But it sounds like you might be feeding way too much without looking at it and how big the flakes are. If you have that much hay that you're wasting, we just don't waste a lot of hay. They eat it up, and it's okay. I guess I feel it's okay if they go a couple hours without hay, and our boarders feel comfortable with it. They know their horses are at a really good weight. If you get a client who feels their horse needs to be eating 24/7, that might be someone that is a challenging client when they have this idea. And we do know that the horse's gut, and that's the way they're made. They need to keep hay coming through it, but they do stop. They stop and they sleep and they rest and they go play, and so they're not constantly eating constantly. And if you do have a horse like that, those are the horses that tend to get obese anyways, and then you got a problem. So maybe you should, I can't tell without looking at your place and how much you're feeding, but maybe you might be feeding too much is kind of my first thought. So I hope that answers your question. If you have any more thoughts on that, let Trish know, because I don't know the whole dynamics of your place. So, okay. Any other questions there?
Yes.
Okay.
Just one more.
Okay.
Is there a rule of thumb for acres per horse?
To be able to live on pasture without feeding grass, or just for room. Because I don't know exactly. If you're like our horses, like my horses in their paddock, I have 4 horses, and then we have a boarder's horse, so there's 5 altogether. Well, one's a miniature horse, so he doesn't really count like a full horse. He's like a little quarter of a horse, but he's with my horses. And I think our paddock is probably I don't know if it's like 150 feet by 150 feet, something like that, and they do just fine in that. Now if you're talking about pasture, you'd have to read some articles and ask your vets. I thought they used to say 5 acres to sustain a horse on grass, on pasture. Okay, go ahead.
She says for room, to not have the land destroyed, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, okay, to not have are you talking about for pasture?
She didn't say that
Because
specifically.
in the paddocks it's going to get destroyed. I mean, they're going to eat it down. Our paddocks are they're all dirt now, and at one time they were all grass. And they're complete dirt. They have been for 15 years. So on the dry lots, which our horses stay in the wintertime and spring, they're not allowed on the pasture at all. The pastures are right now are kind of just waking up and growing. They won't even go out there till like probably mid-June, and we'll introduce them out there. So is that what they meant? Okay. So then, so for the dry lots, they're gonna eat everything up. You'd have to have so much acreage, and I don't know how many horses you have at your place, but even with a big place, they're gonna just eat it down. They're gonna just eat it down to nothing. And it depends on your seasons. It depends on where you live. Our season here in Wisconsin is very short. Everything grows really fast. And then by August, it just kind of like, you can tell everything starts to slow down. And by September, it's kind of like really fading off. So it's a really fast season. And we control it pretty much, how often the horses go out on pasture. And they're not out there 24/7, and they get fed morning and night too. We don't have enough acreage for that. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, do you have another one? Okay, this one was one that I got, and I wanted to talk about it because I think a lot of people have this problem. And it says, I am enjoying your podcast. This is from someone from Ontario, Canada. And thanks for sharing all you've learned. We've also experienced much of what you talk about. It's nice to be understood. Yes, we're all in this together. Right now, we've also got to the place where we all have different disciplines and trainers, and we love having them there. So they have a multi-discipline barn, but they're having problems. We have the dressage riders want an empty arena, and the hunter jumpers come in and they want their jumps up. And they're having drama with both types of disciplines using the arenas and getting frustrated because either the jumps are up or they've been taken down. And I don't know if we need to set exact times and when we can have certain disciplines in the arena. They want to have a casual barn, but it's causing problems and people are becoming frustrated. What do you recommend? We have 2 outdoor arenas and 2 indoor, so this is a huge place. And they all have their preferences to which ones they like best. Of course. Everyone always has their preferences on which ones they like best. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about our place. We have 1 indoor arena. It's 80 by 200, and then 1 outdoor arena. We used to have a second outdoor arena, but we turned it in. It does have jumps on it, but we took the fencing down, and we put an obstacle course in one half, and then jumps in the other, because it was like 150 by 250, so it was huge. And we kind of redid that a little bit back there in the back part of our property. I have had problems throughout the years, not too much right now, but where you have problems with disciplines in this using the same arena. So I can remember when we first opened, we had a couple people that had carts, and my daughter was one of them. Her miniature horse pulled a cart, and then we had another lady who had a cart. And a lot of people didn't like the carts in the arena at the same time because they were worried their horse was going to be spooked. Then I had a problem with the dressage people who wanted the whole ring, and then I had the same other people who wanted to jump. And because they're 2 completely different disciplines, and you have the horses are ridden differently, it does become a problem. What I had to do, because we only have the 1 indoor arena, and in the winter that's all there is to ride because everything else outside is covered with snow, is which would be, if you're from Ontario, Canada, I'm sure you guys get a lot of snow up there too, so you guys would be the same way, where you wouldn't be able to use the outdoor arenas. what I did for the people who wanted to jump and they wanted to set up a full jump course, we had, for a while there, we made designated times when they could do that. And the people who wanted to do dressage knew that the arena was being used during that time. Now, was I going to please everybody at that time? Of course not, because that meant that there were certain evenings that they couldn't, or certain days. I think we did a Saturday midday for jumping, and maybe another day. And then, I have both of these clients, and they're going to shows, and they need to practice. And how do you navigate all that? I had to set up times, and I said, this is how it's going to work. I only had the one indoor arena, so they didn't get to choose between two arenas. So at your place, you have two indoor arenas, and in the summer, you have two outdoor arenas. As the barn owner or the manager, this is where I want you to toughen up a little bit, and I want you to say, this is how it's going to be at this barn. And it might mean that someone gets upset, but you're going to say which arena is going to be used for what discipline and on what days for both disciplines. And it might be that this arena, you're going to choose which arena is best for dressage and which one's best for jumping. And I would do it that way, and I would just say, this is how we're going to do it. Now, could someone get upset and leave because they don't like the new rules? Yeah, it's always a chance you take, but I would do it for your own sanity. And for the most part, most people aren't going to leave because of that. They might get a little huffy for the moment because now things are being restricted a little. But if they're not going to get along well, or there's a problem, then you're going to have to do that, because those two disciplines require completely different use of the arena. And the jumping, you really need to have everybody out while someone's jumping. You can't have someone doing dressage while someone's jumping all these rails for safety. So I would, for me, if it were my barn, I would designate it like we did. Now, we don't, since that was a few years ago that we had to do that, and then things started changing and evolving. And right now, we don't have that problem, because the people that were really big into jumping, a lot of them have either graduated high school or they've moved on. And so right now, we have more people that like to set up a trail course in our arena. So they can set up a trail course in part of the arena. They can't just set it up right in the middle, because our arena is 200 feet long. But they still have to understand that other people want to ride. So if they want to set up, a quarter of the arena for their trail course, they have plenty of room. And that's okay. I have no problem with that. And usually on Saturday afternoons, they do that, and people know that anyone can come out and ride. But if you're going to jump, or you're going to do dressage or something else, then you just know that they're going to be out there on Saturday afternoons. And they asked me about that, if that was okay, and I said sure. With one arena, you have to do that. Otherwise, you're going to have people getting upset. You have two indoor arenas, so as the barn manager, I would just say, this is what we're going to do, and I would set up a schedule, and then monitor it for a month and see if it needs to be changed a little to better suit everybody, or to better suit who's using it. Because it could be that you have 10 people jumping and only 2 people doing dressage. I don't know your numbers, but I would do that. That's what I would do. And this is such a good question, because every single barn owner and manager that I talk to, they have these problems when they're a multidiscipline barn, because you're not just talking about that. You could be talking about barrel racing. You could be reiners. People doing, if you have saddle seat, all kinds of disciplines. And that's why it's so important. I tell people, you really need to know what kind of barn you want. You can have a multidiscipline barn, but not every single type of riding style is going to work. Almost, you're almost going to have to say, okay, wait a minute, how do we want to navigate all this? We have we've had almost every discipline here. The only one we really don't and is speed. People that are doing barrel racing stuff. It's never really worked out good here. And so I kind of tell people it's not really a good barn. It's not a good fit for them because we just have too many people, other people doing jumping or dressage, other riding. And when you've got people practicing barrels and running full on, our arena is big enough to do it, but I just felt like it was just one more discipline, and then I was going to have a little bit of chaos, and I didn't want to deal with all that. So I usually, if someone tells me they're a barrel racer, I love barrel racing. I think it's an awesome sport, but it really doesn't fit here at our stable. And that's okay. Be honest with them and then recommend them to a stable that might be a better fit. I feel that part of the reason so many managers have problems is because they say yes to everything, and then you have exactly this person in Ontario, can't you have this problem with people not getting along or not knowing how to share the arena very well. But usually a lot of times jumpers and hunter jumpers and dressage, they tend to go together, and a lot of times those same riders are riding, they are doing both. So you'll see those often at the same type of barn. So you've got to figure out where you're going to put all those jumps, because if the jumps are set out, it is hard for a dressage person to do their patterns. And so yeah, set up times. It's okay to do it, and you may not please everybody, but it's okay to say this is how we're going to do it. So okay, any questions or thoughts on that? That's a great question, because if you're going to board horses, you're going to have that happen. You will have, I guarantee you, you're going to have it happen, where you're going to have people come with all kinds of stuff. I'll tell you one thing. We have right now we have 3 people that have carts at our stable, and we've had carts. We've always had someone that is driven, and I look at it like this, that I've always taught my kids that if your horse is nervous of the cart, then have them ride in there, get used to the cart, because you can go to a show, there could be carts all over, it's better to get them used to it. But if you have a boarder who's nervous and gets upset because there's carts, you have to decide if that boarder is a good fit for your barn, or if you're going to make a designated time for driving. I've never had to do that ever. In almost 16 years, I've never had to do a designated time for people to harness horses and drive them in our arena. It's never happened ever. We've had saddlebreds pulling carts, miniature horses, drafts, all different kinds. If people are a little nervous, they want to keep their horse in there and maybe get off, but watch and get their horse used to it. And the funny thing is, we have a lot of people that will go on trail rides, and you'll see people driving horses out on the trails, or especially at shows, you're going to see a lot of it. And I always think it's a good idea to get your horse used to it. But you might have a situation where someone gets upset and says, how can I ride with someone driving in the arena? You're going to have to decide how you want to handle that. And I kind of am a believer, let your horse get used to it. It's good for the horse. It's not going to hurt them. They'll get used to it, and after a while, it's just not even a big deal. And we don't have people drive carts all the time, but sometimes in the summer more. But the thing is, if they want to harness up, the horses here, they all get used to it. It just becomes a non-issue, and that's really good for the horse. So you just have to decide how you want to lead, because everyone's going to be looking to you as the barn manager to decide what decisions you're going to make on that. Okay, so that is a really good question. Okay. This is a really, I love this subject because we are just transitioning into spring just like everybody else. And with the spring comes horse shows and trail rides. And I had a question, how do you handle, I'm going to say something right now. I was typing this question up. Do you think I made it big enough? This is like really big letters because I couldn't see it. And I'm like, wow, I really typed that up big. How do you handle boarders taking hay for horse shows and trail rides? So I thought this was a good question because this happens a lot. If you are going to have a boarding stable and you're going to have someone trail ride off, go on trail rides, go camping, go to a horse show, go out of state, how do you do the hay? Are you going to let them take the hay? Are you not? Are you going to charge extra? How do you do that? And I've seen barns do it a lot of different ways. I personally let them take hay because, you know, they're already paying for the hay as a boarder. So if they're going to take a couple bales of hay to a horse show for the weekend, I have no problem with it at all. I do know one barn in the area that they do not let anybody take any hay no matter what when they go off property. And that's how they do it there. That's, you know, if they want to do that. I don't mind because I figured you've already paid your board and your horse gets paid hay, you know, I mean, gets paid, you paid for them to be fed. So I let them take hay, but I am kind of strict about it. You know, it's not a free-for-all. I also understand that at a horse show or when you have your horse tied at a trail ride, I also understand you're going to probably feed your horse a little bit more because you want to keep them eating, especially at a show when they're in their stall. You don't want them sitting there with nothing there. So I do understand that they're going to use a little bit more hay, and I'm okay with it. I can financially take that because it's not like it's all summer long. But if you feel that they're going to be using more hay than what you normally feed, you might have to rethink how you want to charge that if it becomes an issue. We have not had an issue with it. I'm kind of strict about, well, it was kind of an eye-opener. So when my kids were little, younger, I should say, like high school and middle school, we did a lot of showing, and we would be taking tons of hay. In fact, one show we went to, we had 22 horses leave the barn to go for the weekend. It was nuts, but it was really fun. It was when I had a lot more energy. And we went there and we took a lot of hay, and I was shocked. It was kind of an eye-opener because I was there as a mom. I wasn't there as a barn owner, and I was shocked at how much people were wasting my hay. And I felt like I was just watching $5 and $10 bills just being tossed because they were throwing so much hay in the stall. The horses were peeing and pooping on it. It was getting cleaned out, and that is not how we run our barn. So I was in shock. So after that weekend was over, I had to rethink how I wanted to do that, and I really kind of started to hammer down on, you know, you can't just give your horse a whole bale of hay at one feeding. That's just nuts. They're going to waste it. They're going to trample on it. And I started getting to the point, if I find out that you're wasting hay, I'm going to charge you for it because it's expensive. Hay is the most expensive cost you're going to have in your stable. So I kind of started monitoring a little bit. I don't really have a problem with it. The biggest problem I have is that people don't know how much to feed their horse because they've never done it. So they'll say, well, how much feeding should I give them when I get to the show? And I'll tell them, and I'll say, this is what you do, and if it's all gone, then give them another flake. And you might have to show them what that flake is. But I let them take hay, and it works out just fine. I have no problem with it. But you just have to kind of monitor it. There's not an easy way to do it. Most people are pretty good, and they're not going to just be throwing away all your hay. And if you get to the point where you feel like it's gotten out of control, then you might have to charge for it. So it's just something to think about. The other part of that question was, do you allow them to take bedding for trailering or stalls at a show? And I thought that was a really good question because when we first opened up, believe it or not, this is how naive I was. I let people we have bulk shavings, and I let people put shavings in their trailers, and I was shocked at how much bedding people were taking and putting in their trailers. And then they would trailer away to a show. When they'd come back, they'd empty the whole trailer of all the bedding in our manure pile. I was not ready for that. So I after about a summer of that. I decided I wasn't going to let people just, it wasn't going to be a free-for-all anymore with bedding, and they couldn't just take bedding for going on trail rides or trailering. That wasn't part of boarding. I didn't even know who to go ask at that time, and I just did it. So I know some barns that still do that. I don't do that, and I can remember a couple of people got a little irked with me because I wasn't going to allow them to do that. I also don't let them take bedding for stalls for shows. They have to go buy their own bedding if they're going to do that. They cannot, if they're going to go off property, they have to take their own bedding. They cannot use ours. Even though they paid for the month for it, I don't do that. So if they leave that bedding, they don't get to take it. And you know, the truth is, maybe they don't like it, maybe they don't like that rule, but it's the rule that I made, and it works. And I haven't had anyone leave because of that. If someone was going to leave my stable because of the bedding, because they couldn't put it in their trailer or a stall when they were at a horse show, then there's bigger problems. They're unhappy with a lot of stuff. People wouldn't leave a good barn because of that. I have a feeling they'd be unhappy about a lot of stuff. So anyways, that's a common question. Right now, it's a really, it kind of ramps up and it becomes a really busy time. We already had one of our boarders, well, one of the leases, they went to a show with one of the horses here last weekend, so show season has already started. And with show season, it gets a little crazy, and if you get someone new, you have to explain how you do things. This person, he wanted to know if he could take our bucket out of our stall, the water bucket, to use for their stall at the show they were going to, and I said no. I said you have to go purchase your own bucket and take all your own stuff. I don't let them take anything out of the stall, because then it all has to be filled up when they get back, and they may say they're going to do it, but it just makes my job more difficult. I keep things very simple. Whatever you do off property, you have to have all your own provisions. You can't take anything from the stall with you. So I hope that kind of answers that question on that. Horse show season is kind of busy for barn owners and barn managers, because you have horses coming and going. And another question that I get asked a lot is, how do I, when you have a lot of people leaving for a show, how do I navigate all that with feeding, with horses coming in, late, leaving early? And I am really a huge person on communication. The big thing is, if your horse is going to be leaving for a show, we have a board that you write it on, and you tell me what days the horse is going to be gone. You can shoot me an email, a text. If you're going to be leaving at 3 in the morning, that's no problem. Just let me know. If you're coming home at 3 in the morning, that's no problem. Just let me know. I'll have the stall ready for you. And it's that's an element of boarding horses that sometimes can get a little crazy. And I just tell people, keep the communication open, and make sure they communicate. They have to communicate, and you have to communicate back. And I just had one person, she does the long distance riding with her horse, and she just went to go to a trail ride tonight to condition her horse, and she said, I'm going to be back after hours, and we close at 8. And she said, is that a problem? I said, nope, we'll leave the door open for you, and we'll leave it unlocked, and just make sure the lights are out, because she knew she'd be after hours, and she's very responsible, so I knew it wouldn't be a problem. So I think communication is really important, especially when you got horses leaving and coming and going here and there all the time. Otherwise, it gets a little nuts. So I hope that answers your question. Anything? Okay. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, and I had someone email me this week. They were kind of stressed out. Well, they were really stressed out because they have mud, just like we have mud. It's the muddy season, and it says, now that spring is here, my barn has become very busy, and I'm having problems with clients not cleaning up. Hair, mud, and the wash stall is a disaster. Have you had this issue, and how did you correct the problem? Signed, Desperate. I love it. That's a great question. This is like the busiest, messiest time of year. And yes, I've had lots of problems. And I'm sure that if you were to ask previous boarders, especially the high school kids, some of them will remember me as the crabby barn owner. Because I have been crabby. How do you handle all that with the mud and all that? So I don't know where this person's from, but right now we're super muddy. We've had a lot of rain the last few days, and it's just a mess. First of all, we have a wash stall, and we have kind of a rule that in this time of year, if it's real muddy and the horses are outside, they have to rinse the horses' legs off outside. They cannot use the wash stall because the wash stall it can only handle so much soot and mud, and even if you empty it after every horse, it still can back up. We've had to call a plumber out only one time in 16 years, but we did, and it was really expensive. And it was because people were not cleaning it well enough. So I tell people, if you're going to hose your horse's legs off, hose them off outside. We don't have hot water outside, but the horse will be fine if their legs get hosed off outside. That way we don't have to worry about all that mud going into the barn. And then if they want to wash their horse in the wash stall once it's open, then we have hot and cold water. So that is part of it. Now, I'm going to be really honest and tell you that through the years, I've had moments. Some of them maybe weren't very shining moments because I've lost my temper. But I have had people, I think in order to get people on board and follow the barn rules, sometimes you have to follow through. You can't have a barn rule and not enforce it. So I don't care how much your barn rule says, sweep up after yourself, sweep up after the horse before you go ride so it's not a mess for other people. Clean up your mess. No matter how much you say it, if you don't enforce it, it's like hot air. It's worthless. Absolutely worthless. So I'm going to be super honest with you and tell you a couple things that happened through my years. And, even though it was, I was angry at the time, it did change things and how people kind of understood I was serious. At the beginning, the first few years of our business, David and I would go out and clean up the barn after people. We were constantly picking up after people, the mud, the hair. People were leaving manure out in the driveway from when their horse would poop, or the horse trailer, or in the aisleway. And it was muddy, and we were getting really upset because we were constantly cleaning up after people. And it was nuts. It was like, what are we doing? And we built this beautiful barn, and it was brand new, and we were just seeing it. People just didn't care about it. So finally, as I started to get stronger in my barn management skills and being more assertive as a barn owner, finally I started laying down the law. It took me a few years to get into that. And as I did, I can remember one girl who she washed her horse and put the horse in the stall, and it was during spring, so there was hair everywhere, mud everywhere, the horse had pooped, and she was in a hurry and she left, and she got in her car to go home. And I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I got on the phone and I called her, and she was almost home, and she lived about 20 minutes away. And I said, you just used a wash stall, you need to come back and clean it up. And I thought, oh, I'm going to lose a boarder over this. She's going to tell her mom, because she was underage. And I thought, she's going to tell her mom and they're going to move their horse. She came back to clean it up. I called her mother right away, and I told her what I did, and I couldn't believe it. Her mother supported me, and she came back and cleaned it up. And you know what? I never, ever had her leave a mess again. and she stayed for another 2 years, graduated high school, they sold the horse, and she was done riding. But it was one of those times when you do something and you think, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen here? It happens, and I did it. I wasn't rude to her, but she knew I'd had it. And she came back and she cleaned it all up, and she was not happy with me. But I did call her mom. I think it's important if you're dealing with anyone under the age of 18, especially because the parents are paying for the board and they're the ones that sign the contract. Anytime I've had a problem with kids like that, I've always called the parents to tell them they need to know what's going on. They need to be in the loop. And then I had another time a couple years later where I had a person who was chronically always tacking up their horse, and then they would leave to go into the arena to ride and leave a complete mess everywhere. And usually that particular horse, some horses always poop when they're in the cross tie. And I came in the barn and I came in to feed. It was afternoon chores. And finally, it was kind of like another one of those moments where it's like an epiphany. You just like, I'm done. And so I know when she saw me coming into the arena, she was probably like the Wicked Witch of the West was coming in on her bicycle from The Wizard of Oz, because I know I had this look on my face. I actually stopped the lesson and I told her she had to get off her horse and go clean up her mess. And I sat there and I held the horse while she went and cleaned up her mess. And she didn't talk to me for a while, but you know what? She was a really nice girl. We worked it out. It never happened again. And she stayed all the way until she graduated high school, too. It was part of it. I would love to say part of it is that age, 16, 17, getting older. But anyways, once you start doing that, or, asking people, don't forget to sweep up, and you can be really nice about it. You can't control how they receive it, but I think if you're real nice and professional about it, most people get it. And then they realize when they see you, oh, I'm going to clean up, and they don't want to, they don't want to hear from you. I don't have a problem really anymore. It's kind of one of those weird situations where you have to just learn how you can present yourself. And I do probably present myself differently. It's harder for me to talk to someone my own age about cleaning up than it is for the kids, because I have kids. And so as a mom, I can relate to that. And so that part of it is easier to say to them. It's really hard as someone my age, in my 50s, to go up to someone else who's in their 50s or even a little older than me and say, oh, can you clean up your mess? It's one of those awkward moments. But if you have respect between each other and you have a really good relationship as far as a client and a barn manager or barn owner, it's not a problem. If you have someone in your stable that just will not do it, or they don't have respect for you, or they are annoyed at the fact that you ask them to clean up their mess, and they know that's in the barn rules, then I don't know if that's the right person for your barn. That kind of person can be toxic. And I think that's what happens in a lot of boarding stables, and that's why so many barn owners and barn managers get burnt out, is because of this toxic attitude. And I'm like, clip it. You don't deserve it. You don't need that in your business, and you can find someone else that's going to love being at your stable. But when you have someone who just kind of does what they want, and they kind of roll their eyes when you ask them to do something, you're going to get to a point, it may take 2 years, it may take 10, where you're just done. And you're going to say, I don't need this. I don't need the disrespect, because I'm taking care of your horses every day. And, you might just have to say, this might not be the right barn for you. So it's just something to think about. Okay. Hop on in if you have any questions. Okay, so one thing I want to talk about too that is very frustrating for barn owners and barn managers is mud, because we have a lot of mud, and What is too much mud? How much is too much mud? When do you leave the horses in? When do you put them out in the mud? And how do you appease? How do you make everyone happy? And it's a really hard time of year for everybody. I would say that if you live in a state where you have snow and cold temperatures, then you're really going to have a problem in the spring, especially when the frost is coming out and all the snow is melted, then you have rain coming. It's just a really sloppy month. And we are in it right now, and in fact, we've had the horses in a couple days because we had rain, and we are really muddy. And tomorrow I'm hoping to get them all out, and they're going to get muddy. How do you navigate that when you have some people who want their horses out all the time, no matter how muddy it is, and then you have some people who want their horses in no matter how, because they don't want their horses to get mud. And even issues with horses with shoes and shoes pulling. This part of barn management is really challenging, I think, for any boarding stable, because you find yourself, if you're not careful, you're trying to please everybody, and ultimately it makes more work for you. So what I did at the beginning, when we first opened, we, on each of our tack, we have 2 tack rooms in our main barn, and there's a dry erase board, and we have a little thing that says horses in. And if a horse is going to be in for vet or farrier, or if the horse is in because they're lame, the horse's name goes up there so we know that that horse doesn't get put out. And when our barn was brand new, we had virgin farmland that was all fenced off, and we had serious mud because the land had never been used for anything else. So it was really soft. And we went through our first spring, and we had list after list after list of people writing their horses' names on because they didn't want their horses out there. So now we have all these horses in because the mud, and it's a lot more work, a lot more bedding, a lot more cleaning, topping off waters, and it was kind of a nightmare those first couple of years. Finally, it took me a few years to kind of navigate through all that and decide how I wanted to do it. And I found for me that we had to decide when the horses would be in and when they would go out. And I would call the shots, and if your horse got muddy, they got muddy. They weren't going to be hurt. It wasn't the kind of mud that was going to hurt them. It was just muddy, messy. But it wasn't going to hurt their legs. And we had to make a decision, and I had to make a decision that horses would go out every day if the weather was good, and if it was muddy, they would go out in it. And if you had a lesson, you had to go get your horse out of the mud and clean them off, hose their legs off. And that didn't go well. When I first started making those changes, I had a lot of people leave because they wanted their horse in when it was muddy. But the thing is, I was ending up having horses in for a month straight because of the mud, and I didn't want that. So that was a change I made. And when we got through that and then new people came, I learned to be very direct and say, look, we have mud here during the springtime. It can get really muddy for a couple weeks, and your horse might be in it, or we might keep them in depending on what we feel the footing is like. And so right now, again, 16 years later, we're doing the same thing. We're in April, and we're muddy. So we have now decided over the last probably like 4 years that when people come here, if I say the horses are going to be in due to the mud, we're not going to put them out because it's too wet, or it's been raining and we don't feel that the conditions are good. I now will allow our boarders to put their horses out if they want into their designated paddock, if they want to do it, but they have to bring them back in too. And we have a few people that will put their horses out in it, and then a lot of people that don't. And then when I call it and I say, okay, the horses are going out tomorrow, everybody goes back out. I give the boarders a little bit of control on that so that if they don't mind their horse out in the mud, they put the horse out at their own risk. Any time of year that they choose to put the horse out, And I feel that either the footing isn't good or it is a little bit too wet, too muddy. If they want to do it, they're doing it at their own risk. And I put guidelines around that so they understand, and it works out really well. That way the people that want their horse out no matter what can do it, and the people that want their horse in can do it. And then when the ground dries up a little bit more and they're going out every day, then every horse goes out. And so I give them that, and it works out really nice. And that's sometimes people, you know, when you have a boarding stable, you're going to always have both ends of the spectrum. You're going to have people that feel the horse should be out no matter what the weather is, whether it's raining, whether it's cold, whether it's extremely muddy. And then you're going to have people that only want the horse out when it's 70 degrees and sunny. So as a barn manager, you have to make the decision on what you're going to do, and you have to stick by it. And you can't please both sides of it. And you'll probably go through a little transition during those early years, but then people will you'll start to get the reputation of what kind of stable you have and how you do things, and then it kind of falls into place, and you'll attract the right type of boarders. So I want people to get an idea of that, because when you start trying to please everybody, it always turns out a mess, and it's very stressful. So I wanted to talk about that because I'm dealing with mud right now, and tomorrow we're going to try to get our horses back outside. I'm praying it doesn't rain tonight, and their legs are going to get a little muddy, but it's not the kind of mud that's going to hurt them at all. They're just going to be dirty. Do you have any questions, Trish?
Yes.
Okay.
How do you store jump standards and equipment when not in use? Our people do very well setting up and tearing down their jumps, but we don't have a separate place for storage, so it ends up along the outer perimeter of the arena.
That's a good question. So this is the one thing we didn't think about when we built, and it turns out most people don't think about this, is where are you going to store all the equipment? Because if you're going to have, especially with a multidiscipline barn, you're going to have tons of equipment. You're going to have jump standards, you're going to have poles, you could have all kinds of stuff, obstacle course stuff, but jump standards are probably, and poles are probably the most you see. And we have two corners of our arena on one end, on the far end of our arena, and one corner has 3 carts that are up, straight up, and then a lot of obstacle stuff, and then it's only in the corner. It doesn't go along the wall at all. The other corner is all the jump standards and all the poles and everything, and it works out good because our arena is plenty big. If I had to do it over again and was gonna redesign my arena, we have a service door on that one end. I would have made an outside, I would have attached another room with a slider door so that everything would have been in there, and then you just slide it open to get your equipment out. And we hadn't even thought about that, and I didn't realize, I was shocked at all the equipment that people bring, and it was just more and more. I control where everything goes, and I tell people where they can put it and how I want it lined up so that it's always nice and neat, and everyone is really good about it. I'm kind of strict about, I don't want to see stuff all over, and it's only in these 2 corners, and it works out really well. I don't have anything along the side of the wall because to me it just seems like it'd be a safety issue. And Trish is just showing me it's 7:30 already. Oh my gosh, I can't believe how fast it was. So anyways, as far as equipment, I don't know how big your arena is, but I just have them use the 2 far corners, and that's all they get to use. And I don't put it against the wall that they're riding down. It just makes your arena so much smaller, and it just makes it very messy. So I hope that answers your question. Wow, that was the fastest hour. Every hour gets faster and faster. Oh my gosh. Anyways, we're done. You guys are awesome. A lot of great questions, so much to talk about. I love Open Topic Mondays because you just never know what you're going to be asked. Thank you so much for joining us. remember, go on probarmanagement.com. You can listen to these podcasts anytime, these shows, also on Facebook, YouTube. And follow us on Facebook, because then you'll get notified of any live events on ProBarn Management. And if you are going to do any kind of boarding and you want to have a great weekend and learn so much and meet other people and talk about every part of it, the financials, check out our barn management workshop. We still have some spaces available for that, and it's going to be a fun weekend, June 12th and 13th. Anyways, I want to wish you a wonderful week, and I hope the weather's good where you are and you're not too muddy like we are here. And God bless you, and wishing you the very best in your horse business. And we'll see you next Monday. Thank you.